Several of these people have been imprisoned without due process, without legal representation, without search or arrest warrants, and often without their families even knowing where they are. In other cases, search warrants have been issued without probable cause. In the country I'm referring to, the news often reports what the government feeds them and does not bother to investigate or does not dare tell that they know the information is inaccurate. They are little more than propaganda machines and mouthpieces for political powers. Citizens are stopped as they travel down public roadways and questioned randomly about their destination, their purpose for being where they are. The driver and even occasionally the passenger is required to prove documentation on their identity. Sometimes the driver is unknowingly given a breath test and asked to voluntarily provide some DNA, or compelled to allow a vehicle search. Warrantless searches of people's mail, electronic mail, computer data, medical records, and even their homes are conducted on seemingly regular basis now. People accused of acting against the government are labeled as terrorists and stripped of their basic human rights. Innocent people have been arrested, interrogated, and held without due process based on hearsay and even false accusations. In this country, firearms are regulated by the government, as is the food supply, medical care, medicine, transportation, and many other aspects of life. Children are required to be educated in a government-mandated curriculum. People who wish to educate their own young, well, they must gain authorization and must teach to the government standard. Families are required to ask permission to own many common types of pets, and some are prohibited. Parents are denied the ability to protect their children in many areas. The public is told that the government will protect them. Yet when law enforcement fails in this task, the government says, well, there's no duty to protect the individual, only the community as a whole. The people who live in this country are told that these things are for their own good, for the greater good. They are led to believe that giving up freedom will somehow make them safer, and yet they are not safe. In fact, they may be at greater risk because many are lulled into a false sense of security. This may be exactly what the government of this country wants, to convince citizenry to give up their autonomy for the illusion that they will never be in harm's way. Many countries have convinced their populace of this, only to enslave them once they are no longer able to resist oppression. You might be wondering where this place is, although I've got a sneaking suspicion looking in this audience you already know. Well, it's right here in the United States of America. Many think that this type of thing cannot happen here, yet look around you. Ask Brandon Robb, who was institutionalized without due process and against his will after he spoke out against the Federal Reserve on his Facebook page. Nancy Genovese was arrested and held for over 12 hours for taking photos of a decommissioned helicopter that was on public display at a public airport. Jim Howe was arrested because he walked to school to pick his children up instead of waiting in miles-longs of parents driving to get their children. In New York, people who spoke out against the SAFE Act were forcibly removed from the public meetings, the very venue that they were supposed to be able to voice their opinions. People are arrested and even committed every day for so-called thought crimes, just because somebody accuses them of thinking about maybe doing something that might be illegal, or even worse, something that hasn't arbitrarily been outlawed and it should be legal. Think about this. Our government is based on the premise that we, the people, are the government. In addition, we, the people, have certain God-given rights that no government should deny. The Bill of Rights restates these inalienable rights. The government, on the other hand, has powers that are granted to it by we, the people. This is the very reason for our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Our founders knew the nature of man and the intoxicating effects that powers have on human beings, even well-intended ones. They also understood that as living creatures, there are certain inalienable rights that should not need to be stated and were above those which could be granted or denied by any man or government. These are the stated in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. The First Amendment reiterated that we, the people, have the right to think, believe, and express ourselves without fear of retribution. This includes especially our ability to publicly disagree with our government without fear of retribution or imprisonment. The Second Amendment was not about hunting or civilians owning arms for sporting purposes. It was in fact intended that the government should never have more firepower than the general populace. This is our insurance policy against a government intent on usurping our God-given rights. It is also about the right of every living thing to self-preservation. This right does not end at some invisible line arbitrarily drawn around a building, a property line. It is an inherent right that should never be infringed, yet we allow our government to deny us this very basic yet essential freedom. The Bill of Rights goes on to protect us in many other ways, but they are all just words on paper without the right to keep and bear arms. An armed society is a free society. Consider that when your legislature asks you for a reasonable compromise or makes reference to sporting use for firearms. I want to task you, every one of you, to take a resolve in 2014 to do whatever is in your power to regain what our founding fathers knew to be the essential to a free society. We have given away our most precious gift. We've changed the face of our republic to something that looks nothing like the great vision which led to the birth of our nation. We have work to do, but I got a question. Are you up for the task?
Yes!
Are you up for the task?
Yes!
Will our children and grandchildren remember us as those who gave away our freedom or those who were brave enough to preserve it for future generations? There are many forms of slavery, but the most insidious one is when the subjects are duped into believing it's for their own good. Do we want to leave this legacy to our descendants, or are we willing to stand our ground and demand that our elected representatives uphold the Constitution? This is the spirit of America. This lady doesn't let anybody keep her down.